Hello, and welcome to AWFJ Presents. I'm Jennifer Merin, president of the Alliance of Women Film Journalists. Together with Kino Lorber, we are presenting a curated series of outstanding films directed by some of the world's leading female filmmakers. Here to discuss Julie Dash's 1991 Daughters of the Dust are AWFJ curators Leslie Combemale and Kristen Page-Kirby. Over to you, ladies.
Welcome to Two White Women Examine a Classic of Black Cinema. I think we really we're both huge fans of the movie. I saw it when it first came out, and I think you did too. And so we're going to talk about it. We do have Black members of the Alliance, but they were unavailable, so we're going to pick up the mantle such as we can.
And we've discussed this, that there's some awkwardness here, that this is a movie that is not made for us. That this is one of the very few movies that there is no one who looks like us in this movie at all.
Praise Goddess.
Yeah, and so what we're really trying to do here is to amplify this movie and get more eyes on it. Now, whether there are eyes that see themselves reflected or whether there are eyes that don't, we really want to use the lucky position that we have right now to bring Daughters of the Dust to a wider audience, whether that audience sees the movie as a window or as a mirror, because both are valid.
And it's really important for the fact that so many people finally did get to see themselves up on screen for the first time in this film like they never had before. And that's one of the reasons why Julie wanted to make this movie and one of her inspirations. We know about Julie that she was part of the LA School of Black Filmmakers, or the LA Rebellion Film Movement, which is made up of filmmakers who studied at UCLA in the late 60s to the late 1980s, and created a Black cinema that was an alternative to traditional Hollywood cinema, which almost exclusively had a European perspective and foisted it onto the Black characters as well. She is, as all LA Rebellion filmmakers are, influenced by Latin American, Italian neorealist and European art films, as well as emerging cinema of Africa. And you can definitely see that reflected in the structure and style of Daughters of the Dust. She started writing Daughters of the Dust and was inspired by her father, who has a Gullah background, while she was studying at the American Film Institute, and it took her 10 years to find financing. It was shot on location on St. Helena Island in South Carolina, using all natural light in a protected area where she had to wheelbarrow in all of her equipment over a mile onto in the sand dunes. And with Daughters of the Dust, Julie Dash was the first African-American woman to have a film released theatrically in the US, which is shocking that it took that long. It was a huge success upon release, premiering at Sundance, where the film's director of photography took the top prize for cinematography, and it disappeared completely and was impossible to find for some years afterward, which was very disappointing to those of us who wanted to amplify it at the time, until it was re-released in 2016.
And I think that, coming out of Julie Dash's history, even though, the movie was a critical success almost universally, then she couldn't get work in movies. She's had a long career in television. She has been working, but her influence really extends far beyond name recognition. So while her name may not be at the forefront of everyone's mind, for example, Ava DuVernay has cited her as a huge influence. You don't get to Ava DuVernay without going through Julie Dash first. And then when the re-release got a huge boost with the release of let's all thank Beyonce for Lemonade, because there are some really lovely visual homages and touches to this movie. Now, it's never been confirmed that, yes, we are paying homage to this movie, but it's pretty clear that we think Beyonce is a fan too, which, you know, for me, speaks very highly of the film.
And speaks highly of Beyonce because she's using art that is really, really influential and really important in the history of Black film and in the history of female filmmakers as well. Why don't you talk a little bit about the structure of the film?
Sure. So the structure of the film is, viewers are going to notice, it's very nonlinear. Everything is very folded in on itself, on top of itself, integrated within itself. And that comes from, you see that in a number of particularly Southern works of art. Now, whether it's Southern films or Southern Gothic literature, that kind of feeling that the past is prologue, as it's said in the movie, that the past is present, that the present is past, that everything is all kind of, you know, blended together, is often a technique that, you know, gets credited to Faulkner, or that you see in Walker Percy, or that you see in like Southern white male literature. And of course, like so much of American Southern culture, there are things that are celebrated as Southern when they really need to be celebrated as the heritage of the enslaved Africans brought to the country. That you know, just like, you know, we wouldn't have this language that's so embodied in Southern art without the language of the people that were brought here against their will. And so Faulkner always gets credit for it when it's not really his doing.
Right, and also Julie Dash herself talked about what she called the Griot structure, and griots are West African historian, storyteller, poets, and they were the repository of oral tradition, and they came to birthings and deaths and weddings and special events, and they would recall the family's history over days, and they were inspired to tell whatever aspect of the story they were telling based on what else was happening at the time. So it was not a linear way of telling, of recalling the history of the family and culture. So you know, you see that in Daughters of the Dust, and I love that she's using African storytelling and bringing it back to American filmmaking, bringing it to American filmmaking in a way that you can see the direct, connection to Griot and nonlinear and African storytelling.
Yeah. I mean, and we've talked before about, you know, that direct line we can really trace also through the experiences and some of the characters. The character of Eula in particular, who is pregnant after being raped. We don't know whether it's her husband or her attacker's child that she carries, and that's part of the ambiguity that comes through that. But she has a wonderful speech that Leslie was nice enough to write down for me, and I'm going to just go ahead and read, not doing it justice in the least, that she says, "We are the daughters of those old dusty things Nana carries in her tin can. We carry too many scars from the past. Our past owns us. We wear our scars like armor for protection, thick, ugly scars that no one can pass through to ever hurt us again." And it's just been, for me, that speech and her strength and her pain really, to me, correspond to what Black women in America have had to do. They are so often celebrated for their strength, rightfully so. However, they tend, wider culture as a whole tends to celebrate them for their strength without ever looking for a way to lessen their pain. And instead, it's simply, whether it's generational pain, whether it's physical pain, whether it's emotional pain, is simply considered their burden to bear. And I feel like I'm repeating myself, they're celebrated for doing it when in fact, it's still a burden. And it blocks off the full humanity of Black women when we don't take a moment and say, maybe somebody else should be shouldering some of the burdens that they historically and, you know, even now have to bear.
And in large part from the white culture that expects it of them, whether it's raising other people's white children, you know, in the 50s, and even now in terms of the pandemic, where it's disproportionately affected the jobs and the family lives of people of color and Black women. You know, I think it's something that makes this film really timely right now, you know, and continues through Black Lives Matter, what mothers, Black mothers are being expected to shoulder and to bear, because nobody is really solving the problem of Black children being shot to death, and women, all Black folk. So I think that it becomes very timely again, this film, and it's never not, which is too bad, because it would be nice if it was just a historical experience. It was just something that we were looking back on. And, you know, that's not what this is. It makes it so timely. And then, you know, sharing in the same burden of having been raped is Yellow Mary, who's my favorite character in the film, who comes into the film on this boat, beautifully appointed with this gorgeous dress, and, you know, all of these, you know, just looking perfect, and kind of, as Julie Dash said, representative of a Yoruba goddess named Yamoja, who is the mother spirit and patron saint of women, especially pregnant women. And here she does arrive by water, and she is a woman of independent means. She's a sex worker, because it's the only way that she has been able outside of the island to you know, rise in her station. And she brings her lover with her, coming to say hello and goodbye en route, in theory, to Nova Scotia, which was also the last stop on the Underground Railroad. So I think, you know, there's this really powerful energy of, you know, women, powerful women, and then, you know, the fact that this goddess that Julie Dash is representing is the goddess of pregnant women. And here are two women, one who had been raped and the other who is pregnant. It, I think, is a very powerful statement around, you know, that the whole film has so much going on, but that in particular really resonated with me, and I'm sure a lot of people who watch it. And then also just the fact that her name is Yellow Mary brings into the film a conversation about colorism that you don't really see a lot in film, and certainly not a film by a Black female filmmaker. And I really appreciated that, because it's not something that you see a lot. And I think it's so important to talk about, whether it's symbolically or literally with different characters representing different colors within the spectrum of Black women or Black African Americans.
I mean, I think also something that's really important for visitors to, or for viewers, excuse me, visitors though, I think feels kind of appropriate in this one, is, you know, as you talked about filming on location, natural lighting, you know, the shots are just so beautiful, and they always seem to last maybe a second or two longer than another director might have chosen. And it's really beautiful because it gives you a chance to look at every part of the frame. I mean, every time you watch this film, you're going to notice something different, because they're beautifully composed, but there's always this element to the wildness in the background. You know, I know that that Julie Dash had to deal with weather and all the fun things that happen when you shoot outside. And you get that sense that the ocean is uncontrolled, that the trees are uncontrolled. The score, which I know you're gonna touch on later, is echoed with the wind that is almost constant. And it's just a beautiful, languid form of storytelling that really invites the viewer in one sense, because you get to control where you look in the frame and where you don't look. But on the other hand, it really forces you to be fully present, because otherwise you're going to miss something. And it just keeps you searching and keeps you looking. And so the visuals are always in filmmaking, obviously, so integral. But here, there is just something special about being invited into a world, particularly if this is not a world you're familiar with, and just being allowed. It feels like a privilege to sit and watch and be a part of the story that's unfolding.
And I love that there are these tableaus that happen, like where because they brought in a photographer to document the last days of them being on the island, that they have these moments where everybody is posed for a photograph, and there are moments where they're composed that look like photography, and that she was inspired by the work of photographer James Van de Zee. And to me, I love in particular, and it just sticks in my mind so much, when they take that photograph of everyone on the beach. It's so beautiful and so beautifully composed, and it's this wide shot. There's so many moments in this film that really stick in your mind, and that they don't just stick in your mind visually because of the way she's using language, using the Gullah language. You're also really present for the characters, and you're present for their experience while you're watching these images, and so it really sticks with you. One of the things I really love is that she talks about using a particular film stock called AWFJ, which it doesn't exist anymore, but the idea was that it had a lot of brown and orange undertones in it. She didn't want to use Kodak, she said, because it has blue and green undertones, and it reads shadow tones as blue and green. So reading African American skin as blue and green, which is why so many older movies, when you watch them, Black characters kind of fade and you don't see them crisply. And so she's figured out how to solve this problem so that she could show a spectrum of Black skin beautifully represented, and represented in a way that we can actually see them and see the characters and how they're feeling and their expressions and everything. And she's actually said no one needs to have a problem being able to see Black skin regardless of how dark or light, because it's been sorted. There is no reason dark-skinned African Americans need to look blue or green. So I love that she said that. And in terms of the music, John Barnes is the composer, and he used all of these different instruments that were African and Middle Eastern, and he used African drums, and he mixed this synclavier-based percussion with authentic music from Africa, India, and the Middle East. And one of his big aims was to depict various religions, including traditional West African worship ritual, Santeria, Islam, Catholicism, and Baptist beliefs through musical expression. And sadly, it's impossible to find the score. I beseech someone out there who is with a score distributor, which I put out on Twitter, to get that out there so we can listen to it on a regular basis. It's such a beautiful score, and it really adds so much to the experience of watching the film.
Or maybe Beyonce can step in again and really help.
There you go.
I
That'd
think.
be nice. Any other thoughts you'd like to share before we call it an afternoon? And
No, I'm just so excited for more people to see this movie. It is astounding to me that it came out in 1991. And out of curiosity, I went back and looked at, and this came out the same year as Boys in the Hood. It came out the same year as Silence of the Lambs. It came out where there was kind of this resurgence of Black storytelling, of Black filmmaking, and to a lesser extent, to women-centered stories. And the fact that it was this recent and was still the first is, to me, jaw-dropping. This film should be canon. It should be part of the American film canon. I think it is part of the American film canon. We just need to get more eyes on the images, and it's going to take its rightful place.
And hopefully, in addition to that, since Julie Dash has actually written a sequel to the story in novel form, and she's been trying to get production made, bring together enough financing to make the sequel to this film, more people seeing it, more people appreciating it, more people celebrating it, means hopefully that we will see what happens with these characters some years after this, because our hearts are with them after we're done seeing the film. Thank you guys so much for listening to us chatty chat, or white chicks chatting. We appreciate so much you guys watching us, and that you watch the film, and go tell your friends about the movie and talk about it, and talk about Julie Dash, and follow her wherever she is on social media. She's in a number of places. And keep watching Kino Lorber, because they've got some great movies. Thank you. Bye.